Well, it's good to see you this morning. We are in the last week of a series we've been doing called Matters of the Heart. And if you missed any of it, you can catch it back on our YouTube channel. The back episodes are there. And today we're actually talking about generosity. And so I have the ultimate setup question for you, all right? How many of you want to be generous? And don't answer out loud, because some of you, as soon as you heard that, you think, well, I want to be, I'm in church. I don't want to have them, you're going to ask me for money or something. It's a setup question, but no tricks, no games. I mean, we want to be generous people, right? Because what's the alternative? I want to be stingy, selfish, and self-centered, right? I mean, there's not really a good other option. And so we want to be generous. As a matter of fact, the World Giving Index, this is a group that actually judges countries for how generous they are. And so they rank them. And so over the last decade, the United States was actually number one in generosity compared to all the other countries in the world. And I was kind of surprised by that. And I thought, well, maybe it's because, frankly, the United States compared to a lot of countries in the world is pretty wealthy. But it doesn't have anything to do with money. They base it on people's attitudes, people's day-to-day life, the choices they make, and how they interact with other people. Because the number two country was Myanmar, which is one of the poorer countries in the world. And so we have a reputation, at least, of being generous. And let's be honest, I mean, in the media anyway, the way generous people are portrayed, right? They're really cool, they don't have any troubles, they live this great life, and they also happen to be billionaires, and they're super generous, and oh yeah, it'd be great to be a generous person. We kind of wrap all that together. But the average American, they surveyed people, 60% of Americans said, I would like to be more generous than I am. But my debt, my bills, the money I owe, whatever, keeps me from being generous the way I would like to be. And so we want to be generous. When it comes to generosity, that's what we want to be. We want to be generous. We like to think of ourselves as generous, and we actually want to be a generous person. Now, in this last year, I mean, crazy stuff's happened, and the world's different than it was, and when it'll get back to normal and what normal will look like, all that's still kind of being worked out. But a couple of things we learned over this last year. Family became very important all of a sudden. With everybody locked down and everybody at home, I mean, lots of things started to revolve around the family. Truth actually became really important, with lots of fake news and one person saying this, one person saying that, and which is true, and conspiracy and everything. It's really good to know what's the truth. The truth became very important. And another thing that became very important to a lot of people, mostly because of all the things that happened, especially on a national level, is I need to get my finances in order. Like if they're not, I need to be financially healthy. I need to kind of get a handle on this because I don't know what's going to happen, and I'm scared enough about what has happened that I want to get on top of this. I want to get in control of my finances. And so that's what we've been talking about as a church. And I don't know if it's because I'm a pastor or because I had a background in finance before I went into ministry. I was a finance major. I worked at a bank. I did all that stuff. So maybe just my ears are a little more, tuned to it. But I hear people talking about money stuff all the time. And one of the common ones is, when I get to the end of the month, I just don't have any money. What do I do when there's more month than money? And honestly, which I know it sounds weird, and you're kind of like, well, I wouldn't mind having that problem. I've heard some people say, I don't know what to do with all this money. Like, I have a lot of money, and I pay my bills, and then what do I do with the rest of it? And you're like, well, I would like to try that problem out. I'd love to see what that's like. People wonder about, when should I buy a house? People wonder about, can I retire? And unfortunately, a lot of times within families, we even fight about the money and how we're spending it and who gets what and what are we going to do next, and all of these kinds of things kind of get packed in. And so that's why we've been talking about how to deal with debt. We've talked about saving and retiring. We've talked about motivations, and with all of that, today we're talking about generosity. And you might go, oh man, I don't want to hear about that. Generosity may be the single most important factor in your financial health. And I know what you're thinking already. It's like, wait a minute. I'm going to get financially healthy by giving away money? Is that what you're saying? Yes, it is, but hang with me, okay? Because God does something when we're generous that's different than he does in other places. And so Jesus talked about this. In Matthew 6:21, Jesus said, where your treasure is, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. That honestly, Jesus was saying, finances start in your heart. They don't start with dollars and cents. It doesn't start with your bank account or how much you make or how much you owe. That's not where financial health starts. Financial health starts in your heart. Your money matters. What you do with it matters, and your money is also a matter of your heart. And he goes on to teach us through Proverbs what it looks like to be financially healthy. So if you have a Bible or you're in the app and you want to follow along, we're going to be in Proverbs. But what we need to do is we need to work out our want to. God wants us to be generous, and we say we want to be generous. All we really have to do is work out the want to part. All right, and so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to work out our want to. But Proverbs chapter 21, verse 25 is where we're going to be starting, like I said, if you want to follow along. Now, the thing about Proverbs is this. Even if you're not a follower of Jesus, even if you don't go to church, even if you're not sure you're interested in all the church stuff and religion and everything else, one of the things that's been true time after time after time, when people are willing to live by the truth that we find in Proverbs, their life is better. These are just wise sayings. These are wise directions on how to live a good life, okay? But they become infinitely more powerful if you're a follower of Jesus and you are willing to work these into your life because of what God does. So it's true no matter what. But when it's done out of a faith context and a trust context, it's amazing the impact it has. It's not just a principle anymore. It's an encounter with God, and it's seeing God at work in your life. And that is much bigger and much different than just following some good advice. But having said that, Proverbs is great advice. So let's jump in. Proverbs chapter 21, verse 25 says it this way. It says, the craving of a sluggard, which again is like my favorite word in the whole Bible is sluggard. I don't know why. I love the word sluggard. The cravings of a sluggard, when a Bible says sluggard, it means a lazy, entitled person, okay? The craving of a sluggard will be the death of him because his hands refuse to work. All day long he craves for more. But then the contrast, the righteous, the ones that are set right with God, the righteous give without sparing. So you kind of have this contrast set up where he talks about this idea of the sluggard and the craving and everything else. Really what he's talking about is greed. He's talking about somebody that's greedy, and on top of that, they're lazy. And you think, well, man, that's a terrible combination. You're right, it is. It's the person that says, I should have more. I want more. My life should be better. My life should be different. I should have the things that other people have. I'm entitled to them. And yet at the same time, I'm not really willing to do anything about it. I'm just waiting for somebody to give it to me because I want it. This is the sluggard, and this is the mindset. And the Bible says that leads not to being a bad person, not to having a bad month, not to needing to find a new career. The Bible says that leads to death. I mean, it's heavy. This isn't a small thing. The person that lives that way, it is leading them on a path towards death. But then, like I said, there's a contrast. And I love this contrast because it's so visual. Now, I don't have a lot of money, and almost nobody carries cash, but here's $30. And no, I'm not giving it away. But there's a contrast here, right? And I can show you that contrast without saying a word. The first one I'm going to show you is the righteous, the one he says it gives without sparing. The second one is the greedy, the sluggard, the one that holds on. So when I do this, it communicates something, doesn't it? And when I do this, it communicates something, doesn't it? And the writer of Proverbs and what Jesus would say to us is, it matters even how you hold it in your hand. Do you hold it with an open hand? Are you ready to share it? Are you ready to give it away? Are you ready to help somebody else? Or are you clenching it and holding it because it's yours and you earned it and you worked for it and you have it, and truth is you should probably have more than you have? There's a big difference. It's a big contrast. And what it goes on to say is that greed leads to death. But the opposite is also true. The righteous, the one that gives, their generosity kills greed. Greed kills the sluggard, but generosity kills greed. It overcomes it. It overwhelms it. And all of us, let's just, cards on the table. We all have moments where we're greedy. We all have moments where we feel entitled. We all have moments where we're kind of wrapped up in material things, the things we have or the experiences we want to take or the vacation that we need to have or the whatever it is. I want the new and I've got to have, and we all have moments of that. So let's not pretend. Every one of us deals with that. And Jesus comes along and says, through Proverbs, the way to kill that is through generosity. And now you begin to see that generosity does have something to do with your financial health. Because it's not healthy to go along wanting, entitled, grabbing, holding, trying to gain and have more than everybody else. It's not healthy. And we know that. We intuitively know that. Nobody even has to tell us that. We've seen it play out enough times in the lives of the people around us or in our own life to know that's not where I want to be, because that's not healthy. And Jesus is telling us the way you kill that is through generosity. Generosity kills greed. But there's a warning there too. There's a warning because the sluggard, the lazy, the entitled person is sitting around wanting something but not doing anything about it. That's part of his problem. He's got a couple of problems, but part of his problem is he's just sitting around wanting and not doing anything. And I think there's a warning even for those of us that would say, hey, I want to be generous. I want to live that life. I don't want to be that greedy, entitled person. But there's a warning, because that wanting is what leads to the sluggard's death. And that wanting to be generous doesn't actually make you generous. I know that's a little uncomfortable to hear, but it's doing generosity that kills greed, not desiring generosity. It has to move somehow, some way out of the want to in doing generosity. Desiring generosity is good. It's a great place to start, but it's not the end. You have to move past that. You have to move on from that. But there's something else that generosity does, and you've experienced this. This is so cool. Generosity not only kills greed, generosity is contagious, right? And actually raise your hand if you don't mind. How many of you have ever been in a situation where you went through a drive-through, a coffee shop or something, and the person in front of you paid for you? Yeah. I mean, we experience that all the time. And you know, no guilt here. Most of you probably turned around and what? Paid for the one behind you, right? I mean, generosity becomes contagious because I see somebody else is giving, somebody else is investing, somebody else is sharing, and it just kind of makes me want to do the same thing. Like, I like the way that feels. I like to do that, and somebody did it for me, and it excites me, it encourages me, it makes me feel good, and I want to do that for somebody else. See, generosity is contagious. Now, some of you, if you don't know this, our church is getting ready to launch this huge initiative to bless the healthcare workers in 3 local hospitals. And we want to love them, appreciate them for taking care of us through all that's gone on. We want to say thank you, and we want to just kind of encourage them and show them some generosity. And so we are in the process of packing together these kits and these bags, and they're going to deliver them, and we're going to give them to the people that work there in lots of different ways and lots of different things, hopefully, that they're going to enjoy as a way of us saying thank you. But here's what's going to happen. Here's what's going to happen. Some of you are going to get involved in that. And you're going to collect, or you're going to buy, or you're going to drop off, or you're going to pack the box, or you're going to take the box to the hospital. And you being generous is actually going to kind of make a dent in your world. And it's going to make you feel good about what you're doing. It's going to change your attitude. But even more than that, this is like ripples in the pond. You know when you throw the rock in and the circles move out? It's the same thing. As those workers who receive these gifts, the people that feel appreciated, the people that enjoy the things that we do for them, you know what's going to happen to them? They're going to be more patient with their patients. They're going to be more encouraging of their coworkers. They're going to be more loving towards the families that come to visit the sick people that are there. You see, generosity becomes contagious. That's what it does. Generosity kills the greed inside of us, and it becomes contagious. But that's actually just the first thing that generosity does. The second thing it does is mentioned in Proverbs 28. So again, if you want to follow along, but it says this way. Proverbs 28, verse 22, and then further down the page in verse 27. It says, the stingy are eager to get rich and are unaware that poverty awaits them. And then verse 27, those who give to the poor will lack nothing, but those who close their eyes to them receive many curses. This is such a powerful passage because that word for stingy, it's actually a translation of a Hebrew word. And it doesn't necessarily mean stingy. If you looked at it literally, what it means is the person that kind of screws up their face and squints their eye. That's the actual description. So think about that word picture. Somebody that just, you know, when they see need, when it comes to money, that's the look on their face. Well, again, much like the open hand and the closed fist, that tells you a lot, doesn't it? I mean, if you meet somebody that when they come across a need or it comes to sharing, that their face kind of screws up and they squint out of their eye and their body tightens up, you already know a lot about them, don't you? And that's exactly what he's saying. He's saying the stingy, those who screw up their face, those who overlook needs, those who are not willing to share, those who are looking to get rich. It's about me, it's about getting more, it's about having more, aren't aware that poverty awaits them. And when I read that, I thought, well, wait a minute. I know a lot of mean rich people, and none of them are poor, so what does this mean? What's going on here? How is this really true? Again, sometimes we think our financial health is about dollars and cents, what's in the checkbook or how big the house is. Our financial health starts in our heart. And regardless of how much money you have in a bank account, the poverty of spirit that is willing to walk past need, that is willing to overlook other people, that makes everything about themselves, that person is actually very poor. Because you know this. There's going to come a day, it doesn't matter how much money you have. It's all going to somebody else. Real riches and real poverty aren't dollars and cents. It's about the life you live and the condition of your heart. And Jesus is very clear about this. He doesn't want money to take a position in your heart that isn't supposed to be there. He understands that it will hurt you, it will corrupt you, it will lead you to poverty. But he goes on, he says, so the stingy are eager to get rich. They're unaware that poverty is awaiting. But those who give to the poor will lack nothing. But those who close their eyes to them receive many curses. And that's the other thing that generosity does. Generosity fills you instead of fooling you. It fills you up instead of fooling you. And I thought about a way to express this and explain this. And really there was a kind of a thing from my own life that I think really, it was so clear to me when we made this decision. When Don and I first got married, one of the things that we decided to do was whenever we have an extra something is just to give it away. So if we have extra furniture, extra, appliances, whatever it might be. And to be honest with you, don't think I'm that great of a person. I hate the sales process. I hate it. I hate answering the phone. I hate all this stuff. We did a garage sale once, put something out there for, it was like $1. And, some guy's like, will you take 75 cents? And I'm like, get out of here. Take your 75 cents. Trying to save a quarter. Just go. Get out of here. Take it. Free. Get out of here. I hate the sales process. So it was an easy decision that, hey, we don't want to sell stuff. And it started that way. But over time, it changed. Over time, it changed. And I'm not talking about giving away stuff that it's like, hey, I really don't want this anymore, and I was going to take it to the dump, but if you want it, I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. I'm talking about good stuff. And over time, and as I look back on the years that we've been married, we've given away furniture, we've given away sectionals, we've given away dining room tables and chairs, we've given away coffee tables, we've given away couches, we've given away all kinds of furniture. We've given away appliances, we've given away microwaves and refrigerators and an oven and a dishwasher, and we just gave them away. We even gave away a car that we were done using. It was going to be replaced. It was still running, and we knew somebody could use it. We just gave it to them. And I don't tell you that to impress you. I tell you that so that you will understand something. You know what we missed from all of that? Nothing. Nothing. We didn't miss the money we could have got for selling it. We didn't miss the stuff that we gave away. But you know what did happen? We were filled up. As we saw young couples that were struggling, that we were able to help. As we saw single adults that were trying to figure out how to make their way and give them something that they would never have otherwise. As we helped older adults that were at the end but not having a lot of money, it just filled us up to do that. Because that's what generosity does. Generosity fills you instead of fooling you. Like the squinty-eyed person that's chasing wealth that ends up poor, it fools you. But generosity instead fills you. This was probably about a month and a half ago. Service was over, and I was out in the lobby, and you guys probably know this. If it's not hard to figure out. We used to pass offering baskets during the service, and people would give, and we would collect the offering and receive it that way. And because of COVID, we stopped doing that. We wanted to be conscientious. We didn't want to, I don't want to touch something that somebody else has touched. Heaven forbid. But we stopped doing that, and we put out offering boxes, and you can see some there and some in the lobby. But not everybody knew that, and so a man named Jeff came up to me after the service one day, and Jeff just told me, he said, Pastor, I want to give, but I don't know where to give. And I said, oh, okay, no problem. I said, first of all, thank you. That's great. But the offering box is right over here. And totally unsolicited, he made a comment, and I won't forget it. He said, when I give to God, it seems like he takes care of everything else. It filled him up. He realized, I'm being generous, and yes, I could have done something else with this money. I could have used it some other way. I could have invested it. I could have bought things. I could have gone on a trip. I could have done all kinds of things. But somehow, when I give to God, he seems to take care of everything. And it was filling him up. So generosity kills greed and becomes contagious. Generosity fills us up instead of fooling us. And the last thing that generosity does is from Proverbs 22:9. It says this: the generous themselves will be blessed, for they share their food with the poor. I mean, it's very straightforward. I mean, you can't really misunderstand that. God is saying, when you're generous, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to bless you. And again, you don't have to raise your hand, but I mean, how many people would say, I would rather be blessed by God than something else? Well, yeah. And if you go back to the prior verse, it said, those who overlook the poor are cursed. So, I mean, this is a pretty clear choice here, and you might not have the best motivations, but it's still pretty obvious. Do I want to be blessed, or do I want to deal with curses? I mean, it's a pretty straightforward choice that we have. Do you want favor, or do you want misfortune? Do you want God to honor you, to bless you, to build you up? Or do you want to deal with something else? Again, it's so obvious that when we give, when we are generous, we find God's favor. And it's not because this is some kind of treat system, right? Like with your dog. If you'll sit long enough, I'll give you a bone. It's not like that at all. It's that God is already so generous. God doesn't ask us to take blind leaps of faith. Hey, just run up to this cliff and jump off and trust that I'll catch you. Because a lot of people think that's what faith is. That's not faith. Not at all. What God does is God gives us mountains of evidence to trust him. And then he says, since I've done all of this, won't you take one more step? Because that's really what generosity is. Generosity is a faith issue. It's not about how much money you have. It's not about if you can afford or not afford or if you give, whatever. Generosity is a faith issue. Because ultimately, like I said, financial health is a heart issue. And so we've talked about it through the series, and today, generosity is a huge influencer in your financial health. Now, I don't know about all the other charities and nonprofits and other stuff out there. There are lots of things that you can be generous towards, and I hope that you are. I think that's great. I think that there are a lot of people doing a lot of great things. However, I can't speak to all those, because I don't know all those places and all those organizations and what they're doing. And I do think it's wise, if you're going to give money to somebody, you ought to find out who they are and what they're doing and where's the money going and all those kinds of things. But I can't speak to everybody else. I can speak to Mountain Ridge Church. Like, I know why people give to Mountain Ridge Church. And generosity is such an important principle, because you know this, and the younger generation senses this, and they say this. I agree with them, by the way. A lot of our 20s and 30s are telling us, man, everybody seems so focused on money, on getting more money and having more stuff and getting bigger and better. And it's just kind of out of whack, isn't it? And the truth of the matter is that for many, it is out of whack. And one of the things that generosity does is it attacks that. And so here's what I can tell you about people that give to Mountain Ridge. People give here for about 4 reasons. Now, they may have different variations, but it probably fits into one of these 4 buckets. And the first one is, really honestly, is only if you're a follower of Jesus. To be honest with you, this is really the only reason this first bucket applies. If you're a follower of Jesus, one of the reasons that you give to God is because God commands it. God says, look, I've been incredibly generous with you. I want you to be generous with others. So God commands it. It's not an option. It's not a suggestion. It's not one of those, hey, if you've got some time or got a little extra money, you ought to do this. God commands us to be generous as followers of Jesus. And so if I'm a follower of Jesus and God says to do that, well, I mean, it's pretty cut and dry. There's not really a whole lot of discussion around that. And so for those of you that are followers of Jesus, one of the reasons that you give is because God tells us to. The other reason is much more of an emotional issue. It's a heart issue, right? You've been in that situation where your neighbor or your friend or your coworker, somebody does something for you, right? They help you out with a big project, or they help you move, or you're sick and they come and check on you and they drop off some food, or whatever the case may be. But somebody does something really thoughtful, really considerate for you. And what is it that you want to do? You're not going to pay them back, but you want to recognize that, don't you? You want to express your gratitude. And my wife is much better about this than I am. And probably if you're a lady, you're probably just better in general with this. But, one of the things that happens all the time is the little thank you card, right? Thank you. Thank you for doing this. This was meaningful. I noticed this. This was helpful. I appreciate this. And if it was really big, a lot of times what you'll do is you'll throw in a gift card for a restaurant, right? What's their favorite restaurant? Mine's Taco Bell, by the way. But what's your favorite restaurant? And I'm going to put that in. Thank you so much. Now, why do you do that? Are you trying to pay them back? I hope not. Most of the time, it's just, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for thinking about me. Thank you for doing something for me. I just want to express the gratitude in my heart because I see that you went out of your way for me. And for so many that give here at Mountain Ridge, that's one of the reasons they give. God, thank you. I see all that you've done for me. And I really do appreciate it. And I know I can't pay you back. And I know I'm not trying to earn anything. I just want to simply say, I appreciate what you're doing for me, God. It's the third reason that people give is the one we just talked about. They want to be blessed by God. And there's nothing wrong with that. Again, what's the alternative? I don't want to be blessed by God. I mean, I want God's favor on my life. And so some of the reason that people give is because what we just read, God blesses those who give. So, well, I want to give. I want to be generous. And then the final reason that people give is because I know that when I give, it makes a difference. I'm giving my money to God, but I also know that that money gets used to impact people and change their lives. Much like this hospital thank you project that we're doing. It makes a difference in people's lives. And when people give to Mountain Ridge, it goes all kinds of places. Sometimes it goes to help build our children's ministry. Sometimes it goes to help folks that can't pay their rent. Sometimes it goes to bless workers in the hospital. Sometimes it goes to hold events so that we can tell people about who Jesus is and try to build a relationship with them. It goes to all kinds of different ways, but it makes a difference because we want to love God and love others. And so when we give, it helps us do that. So, having said that, why don't people give that go to Mountain Ridge? Well, I mean, I got to be honest with you. It's pretty simple, but it's not very pleasant, right? So just kind of brace yourself. Why don't people give that go to Mountain Ridge? Well, the first one is because they're disregarding what God commanded. And the Bible calls that sin. That God says to do something, and I choose to do something else. Or God says to do it this way, and I say, I know better, I'm going to do it a different way. I know better. That's the definition of sin. It's missing the mark. It's moving away from what God said and not trusting what God said. And so one of the reasons we don't give is because we don't follow the command and we sin. Another reason that we don't give is because we don't appreciate what we have. We're kind of more like the sluggard that just sees what they don't have, wants more, wants what they don't have, wants that entitlement sense that there should be more for me. The third reason we don't give, and again, I know it sounds bizarre, is we don't want God's blessing. I just don't want it. I mean, God was pretty clear that he's going to bless me if I'm generous, but I don't want it. I don't want to do that. And then the last reason, again, it's just the opposite. It's not going to make a difference, or I don't want to use the money that I have to make a difference. I don't want to do that. I want to do it something else. I want to use it in a different way. And so I know those aren't pleasant, but that is the bare reality. It's very clear. And so God calls us to this. And for some of us, our response is, our thought process is, but I am generous. And I get it, because I have the argument in my head too. Like, I saw that guy on the street the other day, and I gave him $5. And my sister-in-law, their family had a deal, and so we sent them some money. And, I bought food for this lady at work that had a baby. And those are great. And I'm glad you're doing those. But those are just kind of random acts, aren't they? And they're good. You should do them. But God wants you to be a generous person. He wants to change your heart. He wants you to have a generous character. And that's different than just kind of random acts that you don't control, that just show up here and there, and if you happen to be in the right mood, you do something about it. God says, no. You need a plan to be generous. You need to actually have a plan to make this happen, to make your want to turn into a reality. Because you want to be generous, you want to be thought of as generous, you want to live that life, you want all the things that come with it. So you've got to have some kind of plan to make it actually happen. And so what is that? What would that look like? And I don't want to tell you what my plan is, because that's not why we're here. What does God say about this? We listen to what God said about debt. We listen to what God said about saving money. What does God say about being generous? God's plan is actually very, very simple. He says you should give when you get. When you get money, you get paid, you get money coming in, whether it's once a week or once a month or once a year, whatever it is. Whenever you get money, let that be a cue. Let that be a trigger that says, you know what? Because I've gotten some money, I want to give some money. I want to be generous, and the way I'm going to build that into my life is that whenever I get, I'm going to give. So it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. And the question then becomes, well, but how much? Like, is there like a dollar amount? Is there like an entry fee or something I have to pay? Or what do I do? How much am I supposed to give? Again, God makes it very simple. He doesn't give you an amount. He doesn't say you need to give, $100 or $5 or, $1,000. No, it's not an amount. He says give a percentage. He says give a tithe or a 10th part. In other words, if you're not a math person, it's 90-10. Everything you get, you keep 90% of it, you give 10. So very simple. If you get $100 a week, you give 10 and you keep 90. If you get paid $2,000 every paycheck, you give $200 and you keep $1,800. It's very straightforward. And God says, if you want to change this from a want to a reality, this is how you do it. You give when you get, and you give 10%, a 10th part. And I know what you're thinking. You hear that and you're like, okay, the math part, that's not hard. That's not my problem, right? 10%? That seems like a lot. I mean, I can't do that. I can't cut all that money out because, I got bills and I got stuff and I don't think I can do that. Giving is a matter of faith. And like I said, it is a principle of generosity, and it is not a leap of faith. This is not stand on the edge and jump off and trust that I'll catch you. This is looking back and seeing, who is God? What has he done? And can I trust him for the next step? And so here's the way I would say it. If you're a follower of Jesus and you believe that God loves you, that God is for you, that he sent his son to die on the cross to pay the price of your sins, that he was raised on the third day to bring you a new life, that God himself, his spirit has come to live inside your heart, and that beyond all of that, Jesus has said, I'm going to prepare a place for you. I've got your eternity taken care of. If you believe all of those things, can't you trust him with your finances? If that's who he is, if that's how he's come through for you, don't you think you can trust him with your finances? Malachi 6, it's the only place in the Bible that says this. God actually invites you to test him. And so my suggestion to you would be, when it comes to this idea of generosity, if you're not convinced, if you're not ready to try that, then just test it out. Test it with one paycheck and see what happens. Or maybe for a month. Maybe you say, hey, I'm going to try this for a month and see what happens. Or maybe between now and Easter, it's about 6 weeks. Just try it out and see what happens. Because here's what God said in Malachi, and I honestly believe God says this with a smile on his face. Go ahead and test me. See if you can outgive me. See what happens. Take that step. You've got the evidence. You've got the history. You know what I've done in the past. Take one more step and just try it out. Just test me. See what happens. See if you can outgive me. Because you can't. The only reason we know what generosity is because God showed us what it looked like. And the only thing that has actually got you to where you are today is because of God's generosity. And so it really isn't that much of a test. And to be honest with you, I have never known a person, and I've been doing the church world thing for about 40 years now. I have never known a person that has said, I really regret trying that. I wish I had that money back. I wish I could go back and redo that and change everything because I would never do that again if I had the choice. Actually, what I always hear is just the opposite. I wish I had started that sooner. I wish I had seen God work in my life before now. I wish I had experienced God's blessing. I wish I had seen that generosity make a difference and become contagious and change my heart and make me healthy on the inside. I wish I had done that even sooner. So don't desire to be a generous person. Decide to be a generous person. See, we've all dealt with finances. We've all dealt with money problems. We've all had those moments where we're having a discussion that turns into an argument. We've all had that feeling of fear at times where, I don't know if there's going to be enough. What are we going to do if? Now what? We've all had those moments. And we all have some money to manage, whether it's a lot or a little or whatever. We all have some money to manage. And God says, look, I am for you. I am on your side, and I have a plan for you. I really do. If you will get out of debt, if you will save for the right reasons, and if you will be generous, here's what's going to happen. You won't have to worry about financial things because first and foremost, I will work in your heart, and I will make you into the person I created you to be. And by the way, I will take care of the financial stuff along the way too. It's not blind optimism. It's not hoping and crossing your fingers. It's a long history of God providing and blessing and showing up over and over and over when he says, just take another step and see what happens. We talked about this the very first week. Money is a great tool, but it's a horrible God. And so I would invite you to use your money well instead of being used by your money. Believe that God is for you and trust his plan. Let's pray together.